spending bill. Congress unveils a $1.3 trillion budget. How much money will go to pro-life causes? Fighting human trafficking. The Senate passes a bill to combat the online sex trade. We have Catholic reaction. Syria's civil war. We have the latest on the fighting in the war-torn nation, where the government continues to battle rebels outside of Damascus. And today's Catholic woman.
You are incredible. You are a daughter of God. You're beautiful.
We focus on a young professional who is helping girls discover their feminine genius. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 22nd, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Lawmakers race to enact a sweeping $1.3 trillion budget bill to fund the government. They're working to beat a Friday deadline and avoid another federal shutdown. It includes an increase in defense spending with a 2.4% bump in pay for the military, $1.6 billion for border wall security, and $2 billion for school safety. Missing from the bill, the Conscience Protection Act, crucial legislation meant to protect American workers from being forced to participate in abortion.
This is a very big issue for us to be able to resolve, just basic conscience protections.
Senator James Lankford sponsored the Conscience Protection Act, giving health care workers forced by their employers to assist with abortions the right to sue. Today, his office says Senator Lankford is disappointed that the Conscience Protection Act was not included in the omnibus. In the days ahead, he will continue pushing for a vote on this important bill. His disappointment echoed by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. They say those inside and outside of Congress who worked to defeat the CPA have placed themselves squarely in the category of extremists who insist that all Americans must be forced to participate in the violent act of abortion. The 2,032-page spending bill kept the Johnson Amendment, banning tax-exempt churches from engaging in political activity. On immigration, the spending bill denied Democrats DACA protections for the Dreamers, those who were brought to the United States illegally as children. Also denied funding for Obamacare. Republicans point to Democrats' unwillingness to expand laws banning federal dollars from paying for abortions.
That didn't get included in here for various reasons. Chief among them was that they wouldn't agree to Hyde protections. Hyde protections are something that are non-negotiable for us.
Republicans say they will not contest results in Pennsylvania's special election. Pro-abortion Catholic Democrat Connor Lamb won by about 750 votes over Republican Rick Saccone. The district went heavily for President Trump in 2016, and the president and the administration campaigned in that district for Saccone. Police say the suspect accused of detonating 6 bombs near Austin left a recording on his phone confessing before he killed himself.
He does not at all mention anything about terrorism, nor does he mention anything about hate, but instead it is the outcry of a very challenged young man talking about challenges in his personal life.
Officials say 23-year-old Mark Condit also used the recording to describe the explosives. He took his life as authorities closed in on him. Tariffs for China. President Trump takes the first step to hitting the country with billions of dollars in trade sanctions. The White House says the Asian giant has been stealing American technology. Farmers, electronics retailers, and other U.S. businesses are bracing for a backlash. The communist country says it will take all necessary measures to defend itself. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged 700 points over the trade tensions with China. President Trump's personal legal team, the one handling the response to the Russia investigation, is now without its lead lawyer. John Dowd has resigned. Dowd received pushback after he suggested special counsel Robert Mueller should end his investigation into Russia meddling. He initially claimed he was speaking for the president, but later said he was only speaking for himself. Earlier this week, Pope Francis called prostitution, slavery, and torture for women. Now, a bill combating online sex trafficking will soon be law. The Senate passed the measure with sweeping bipartisan support. Now it heads to the president's desk. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Ivanka Trump championed this bill, and she's thanking the 97 senators who voted in favor of it. I'm told the president will likely sign it in the next couple of weeks. Advocates on the front lines of the human trafficking fight say this victory has been years in the making.
It's a historic moment. It's the biggest step forward we've had in fighting the phenomenon of sex trafficking in nearly 2 decades.
Lisa Thompson, the Vice President of Policy and Research at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, says passage of the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act will stop a prostitution problem that has moved from street corners to the web.
It's being facilitated by classified advertising websites which offer people for sex.
Thompson says sex trafficking websites like Backpage.com have profited millions of dollars at victims' expense. The White House says the president will soon sign the bill that makes those websites pay.
It provides the Department of Justice with more authority to prosecute many people who help facilitate those crimes.
Mark Short, the White House Director of Legislative Affairs, tells me Ivanka Trump helped lead White House efforts pushing legislation long overdue.
I think the reason it took years is because people assumed this was not a problem here in America. They thought it was an international problem, but not one here. And I think over time, more and more of the plights of these poor children have been raised.
Thompson says children are often the targets of sex trafficking, and with the bill's passage, victims will be heard.
This is an issue that the Catholic Church and the U.S. have worked on for decades. The U.S. Ambassador to the Vatican, Callista Gingrich, says ending human trafficking must be a global priority. Ambassador Gingrich says the United States and the Holy See share a common commitment in this fight. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Students at a Northern California high school want to honor the rights of unborn babies. They say they were inspired by recent demonstrations over gun control. A Rockland High School student says the idea was prompted by a history teacher who was placed on administrative leave. She asked students to consider whether there was a double standard over protests on school grounds between gun control and abortion. The president of Peru resigns 1 day before an impeachment vote.
Pienso que lo mejor para el país es que yo renuncie a la presidencia de la República.
President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski faces corruption charges. He blames opposition leaders for launching a witch hunt against him. Some in Congress want to seek impeachment rather than accept his stepping down. The country is about 80% Catholic. The Syrian government says their troops are getting closer to ending resistance by rebels in the suburbs of Damascus. But the U.S. is not convinced. This after months of fighting, which has forced thousands to flee from their bombed-out neighborhoods. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the Pentagon. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Pentagon officials aren't buying into the Syrian government's claim that they are trying to help the thousands of men, women, and children who have fled the greater Damascus area. They're blaming President Bashar Assad's repressive regime and Russia for aiding him.
Syrian rebels released more than a dozen prisoners ahead of a planned evacuation that will see the besieged town of Harasta handed over to government forces. The state-affiliated TV station casting the deal as a victory for the country. This man, who claims to be a Syrian soldier, says he was terrorized and expected the rebels to shoot him, but he thanks God for help from the Syrian army. The claims of victory come after more than a month of relentless shelling by the government. A search and rescue group in Syria, known as the White Helmets, released this footage. It shows injured people being rescued after an airstrike. The international medical charity Doctors Without Borders says the advancing troops captured or destroyed 19 of the 20 hospitals the group was supporting just 1 week ago. Hundreds of people have been killed here in recent weeks, and tens of thousands have fled. This 75-year-old is one of many who were trapped in a suburb of Damascus for years. He says despite a broken leg, he made it out thanks to his crutches. As of now, over 30,000 internally displaced persons from the area are taking shelter in 4 centers outside Damascus. Thousands more are expected as the Red Cross and other groups work to help as many as they can.
Now, one group that is helping out is the Catholic aid organization, Caritas. They estimate more than 6.5 million Syrians have been uprooted from their homes since the Syrian civil war began 8 years ago. Volunteers there say the situation is the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. Now, officials here say that's because, or at least in their mind, is because Bashar Assad's longtime crackdown of his own people and his history of human rights abuses. Lauren?
Wyatt, what are the Syrians who escaped the bombings telling organizations like Caritas about their troubles?
The people are often telling workers about how they are afraid, and quite frankly, a lot of them say they were praying and asking God how long they have to live and how many hours, quite frankly, they have left to live. But they say they're thankful for organizations like Caritas, for example, not only for the material support, but also for the moral support here. Caritas often gives items like blankets, food, but then also they offer out spiritual care as well.
We'll put on our Facebook a way to donate to Caritas. Thank you so much. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the Pentagon. China asks the United States to end all dialogue with Taiwan. The U.S. says it wants to bolster the island nation's democracy. But China sees the move as, quote, detrimental to both sides. Beijing considers Taiwan a breakaway province. The United States opens a $5 million counterterrorism center in Jordan.
3, 2, 1.
It will be used by law enforcement officers from partner countries in the Middle East to practice shooting, storming hideouts, and responding to bomb threats. It's the second facility of its kind in Jordan, a key U.S. ally. One day after a bishop in Brazil is arrested on corruption charges, Jose Ronaldo is charged with diverting around $600,000 in donations from the faithful. Pope Francis has named his temporary replacement, Archbishop Paulo Mendes. He will lead the Diocese of Formosa. Today is World Water Day. According to the UN, there are 663 million people living without safe water supplies close to their homes. And this is a longtime concern of the Holy See. In his encyclical, Laudato Si, the Holy Father mentions water 47 times. He writes, access to safe, drinkable water is a basic and universal human right, since it is essential to human survival and, as such, is a condition for the exercise of other human rights. Coming up, Girl Talk. Part 4 of our series on today's Catholic woman highlights a national program to help young women. And Listening Session, the Holy Father's message for young people. In today's Catholic Woman, we focus on the next generation. After hearing too many friends doubt their inherent value, 26-year-old Julie Larkin had enough, and the nonprofit Girl Talk was born. She and her Girl Talk ambassadors, as she calls them, offer fellowship and help each other through tough life decisions and problems. They carry their message to other young women who may be doubting themselves or are lonely and sad. In her day job, she helps run the Leonine Forum, a program forming future Catholic leaders. Julie Larkin, Executive Director of Girl Talk, thank you so much for opening your home to us.
Thank you so much for having me in my home. This is so wonderful and exciting. Thank you.
Tell me about Girl Talk. Why did you start it and who does it help?
Great. I started it in college, when I was a junior in college, because I was meeting freshman girls that really needed to be loved.
How so?
They were residents of mine, and I kept hearing these stories from them. Julie, I can barely look at myself in the mirror in the morning. I feel so ugly. Julie, I really like this guy in my English class, but he'd never look at me because, you know, I'm so much less pretty than so-and-so. Different things like that on the surface can seem kind of petty, maybe, but deep down there was a real question of self-worth. And I kept hearing these conversations around the hallways, and then one night I got a really terrifying phone call that one of my residents had tried to kill herself. And this was one of the scariest moments of my life, and I ran to her side, and being there with her, I kept thinking, what caused this beautiful, talented, smart 18-year-old to feel that her life was not worth living? And so when I heard this from my other residents, moments of doubt and self-worth, and they would always end their conversations saying, I'm all alone. No one else understands. I'm the only one. And I kept thinking to myself, but you're not the only one, you know?
I've had all these girls who feel the exact same way.
Exactly.
So you started this program, and then you went to a high school in New Hampshire, and now you have these coffee clatches, I guess we could call them, with all the girls coming to your house, and now they are also reaching out. Why is it that women, young women, feel like their lives aren't worthwhile?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think there are a lot of lies out there. I think there's a lot just innate within us. I think there's a lot in the media. We're always trying to live up to this certain expectation, this certain perfection. And we have to be the prettiest, we have to be the smartest, we have to be on top of everything. And if we're not, then we're just not good enough, right? And so we see all this perfection and we think, I need to attain that, and I'm not worth anything until I get there.
Social media has a lot to do with this.
I think it does. Yeah, we see these images on social media, on Instagram. We're constantly scrolling all the time. I mean, the middle school girls we talk to now, I see them scrolling through their phones and I think, oh my gosh, I didn't have this when I was in 6th and 7th
and they have to just have this perfect life. And so what are you teaching? I know that it's not just a Catholic group.
Right, but everything is informed with that beautiful Catholic teaching that we are made in the image and likeness of God, right? That we have dignity and that we are worth it and worthy. So every time we talk to the girls, we tell them that you are enough, you are worthy, and you are loved. And we want them to witness that and experience that in the friendships that they make through Girl Talk, right? So how do we treat each other, right? Are we giving that beautiful love that Christ mirrors to us? Are we treating each other well? Are we welcoming everyone in? Hospitality is a huge part of Girl Talk.
And that's why you have it in your home.
Yes. I have it here in my home, and then all the campus ambassadors, those are the college leaders we call them, they open up their dorms and their apartments and their living spaces to everyone around them. It's open to their peers, because it's so important to be authentic and to be vulnerable. I welcome the girls into my home and they see, oh, there are some dirty dishes there. You know, Julie's a real person. She's not just this perfect, made up, you know, figure.
Founder of a wonderful movement.
Right. But she's real, right? And I love having these authentic conversations with the girls where we really get to know each other and we have authentic friendship. And then they go and then they have that with the girls that they work with as well and they talk to.
What is your dream?
I love that question. My dream is that every woman knows her inherent value. She knows how much dignity she has, and she lives by it. I think it's really easy for us to doubt ourselves and then to settle, whether that's in relationships, whether that's with work,
faith,
whatever the case may be. But this is real life, and this is me, and this is just how it's going to be. No, you are incredible. You are a daughter of God. You're beautiful. What are your dreams? What are your gifts and talents? And how can we help you achieve that, right? So my dream is that every woman achieves her dreams.
Okay, how can you get to my daughter's middle school? Right now.
Great, I'll get you my email.
Julie Larkin, what you're doing is just courageous and wonderful and so needed in this secular and superfluous at sometimes society. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
We have some extra footage from that meeting online. Head to facebook.com. Lauren Ashburn, EWTN, where you can meet some of those girl talkers and see a meeting. And if you're interested in building a sisterhood of self-worth, or you just want to book Julie to speak at your high school or middle school, or bring Girl Talk to your college, please visit their website, ourgirltalk.org. In tomorrow's segment, we go inside the Vatican with Flaminia Giovanelli, who has worked there for 43 years. She tells me about her career serving 5 popes.
I have met all the popes, of course, but those are normally, they are very, very quick meetings. But still, I must say that that Pope Francis told me something very, very nice, a very nice compliment. Yeah, yes. Because when he heard that I was serving here in 43 years, he said, "Oh, I didn't know that you could start to work at the Vatican when you were 6 years old." So he was very nice.
And she'll read to us from her published children's books. Tune in tomorrow to meet this fascinating Catholic woman. And now we turn to you. All week we've asked for your stories of Catholic women who inspired you. Andrea Lamorte writes, "My 2 grandmas and my mother consistently showed me to trust in God, have faith, never lose faith. Thank God for having such great role models." This one comes from Ellen Ashburn. I'm so grateful that my mother openly lived her faith every single day. Just came across her prayer book that is worn out from how much she used it. Thanks, Mom. And finally, John Geron made me cry. My wife is the most influential Catholic woman in my life. We are happily married 64 plus years, are in our late 80s, and never had an argument. But from time to time, we have high decibel discussions. These usually end with us both laughing. She is such an inspiration to me. Her beauty is both spiritual and physical. Up next, what young people want from the church. And a traditional part of the Mass makes a comeback in one New England diocese. Earlier this week, Pope Francis told a group of young people from around the world the church is committed to listening to them. The Vatican invited the young adults to Rome to prepare for a meeting of bishops on youth in October. The Holy Father told them, too often we talk about young people without asking what they think. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliette, tell me what these young people want from the church.
Well, certainly, Lauren, the fact that the Pope opened the pre-synod would have made a great impact, and that was one of the highlights. And he actually took questions. And one of the questions was even on the merits of having tattoos. And he actually said, well, they're okay as long as perhaps you don't have too many. Now, this week, it's an opportunity for everybody to get together from different continents. There are 300 youngsters, and to talk about the challenges they face as well as what hopes they have. And for instance, one girl from Zimbabwe we talked to, she said that a lot of teenagers in her country are taking care of their ailing parents. And she said that they're saving their souls, but they feel that the church doesn't seem to acknowledge that, doesn't seem to appreciate that. And that's one instance of where they would like to be heard more.
So what is the goal? Is it to address concerns of like that woman from Zimbabwe?
Yes, it's to listen to what young people want and what young people need. And this week, what the youngsters are preparing is a document that they're going to put together and present to the Pope on Sunday at the Palm Sunday Mass. And it'll be sort of a draft of the working document that'll be used for the Bishop Synod in October.
And so the bishops in October this fall will then address those concerns to the young people?
Indeed, and let me tell you, these are the sort of concerns that are on the young people's minds. It's issues like secularism, Christian persecution, the refugee crisis, human trafficking, loss of faith, same-sex marriage, and we can even assume that all of these topics and others, even cohabitation, will most probably be on the agenda in the fall when the bishops get together.
Thank you so much, Juliette Lindley, for that preview. EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent.
Thank you, Lauren.
A new study on youth and religion in Europe finds low levels of church attendance and regular prayer. Less than 6% of young Catholics attend weekly Mass in 5 countries, but in Poland, 47% do so. The study also finds roughly 1 in 5 young Catholics in Spain, France, and the UK say they never go to church. For more on this story, including eye-opening numbers about the lack of religion in the Czech Republic, visit CatholicNewsAgency.com. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers shares her message for World Down Syndrome Day, celebrated earlier this week.
Those with Down syndrome just want to have a chance to prove to the world what they can do and to be seen for what they can offer, to be seen for their ability.
Representative McMorris Rogers has a son with Down syndrome, and you can watch the entire interview with Catherine Hadro tonight at 10 Eastern on EWTN. Go to EWTN.com for other airings. The Diocese of Portland in Maine brings back the handshake at the Sign of Peace. It had suspended the practice in January following a flu epidemic. The bishop is still reminding the faithful, if you're sick, you are exempted from Sunday Mass obligation. Finally tonight, Loyola Chicago, a Jesuit school, plays Nevada tonight in the NCAA basketball tournament. Despite being big underdogs, you could say Loyola has a prayer.
Begin with, good and gracious God, help us through this game. We really need your help tonight. I already scouted Nevada, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that team to God, just in case God, you know, needs a little more information and needs to help our team.
Giving God information, that's a new one. 98-year-old Sister Jean Schmidt is the Ramblers chaplain. She prays with the team before each game, attends almost every game. The Ramblers are in the Sweet 16 for the first time since 1985. Go, Sister. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook for more of today's Catholic Woman. Good night, and God bless you.